sharing this information. Now, you have coming up on Sunday, January 14th, from 2 till 6 p.m., a fascinating lecture entitled African American Resistance in the Era of Donald Trump, voter suppression, reparations, and new elections have consequences, and how elections have consequences. What in the world could that possibly be about, Michael Imhotep?
Exactly, how elections have consequences. So, I've done this presentation a few times, and it's been updated, of course, because things just keep changing day by day. But I was in Los Angeles this past New Year's Eve doing this presentation. Okay, I was at the Caress Unity Center. I was in Los Angeles Saturday, December 30th, Sunday, December 31st. And this presentation, actually, I first did it for African Liberation Day here in Detroit at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. And what we look at a few things. Number one, we look at similarities in the rise of Donald Trump and him becoming president. We look at similarities between that and Richard Nixon becoming president. Okay, because there's similarities when you look at the conditions that were going on in this country. Number one, so Richard Nixon becomes president. He wins the election in 1968. Okay, so he was a backlash to he was a backlash to the Civil Rights Movement, to the Black Power movement that we see starting in 1966.
Right.
He was a backlash to affirmative action. He was also a backlash to any perceived gains that African Americans were making as well as he was a backlash to the rebellions that were taking place all across this country.
Was Nixon the first Republican candidate for president to use the so-called Southern strategy?
I don't think he was the first one. He may have been, I'm not sure. I don't remember if he was the first Republican candidate to use the Southern strategy. But remember, is because of he may have been possibly, because what happened was because of the Civil Rights Act of 64 and the Voting Rights Act of 65, you're going to have a flip in the parties. And largely these obstructionist Democrats, right, are going to leave the Democratic Party and go to the Republican Party.
Right.
And you're going to have a lot of African Americans who historically voted Republican, okay, because of Frederick Douglass and different things like this. They historically voted Republican. You're going to have a continuation and a lot of them switching over and voting Democratic as well.
Right.
So if for instance, when you look at the rebellions that are taking place, it wasn't just the Detroit Rebellion started July 23rd, 1967. You have Watts Rebellion. You have, in 1967 alone, 1967, the summer was known as the Long Hot Summer.
Yes.
So in 67 alone, you have 159 violent uprisings across this country. Including Detroit, yeah. Now, all of them were not on the scale of Detroit or Newark, New Jersey or things like this, right? But you're going to have 159 rebellions. This leads to July 28th, 1967, the day after the Detroit Rebellion ends. This leads to President Johnson convening the Kerner Commission, Commission for Civil Disorders, right? Named after Otto Kerner, who was the governor of Ohio, I think it was, or Illinois. So you have all this taking place leading up to Nixon becoming president, and Nixon runs on the platform of law and order.
Yes.
Okay? Donald Trump partly ran on the platform of law and order as well. When you look at Trump, you see Trump was a direct backlash to 2 terms of President Barack Obama, first African-American president, because the black John Hanson was not president. All right, we can talk about that if people want to, but I've totally dispelled that myth, and others have as well. He was a backlash to the Black Lives Matter movement because Trump does not talk about holding police accountable at all, period.
Right.
Okay? And he was a backlash to the browning of America because there's a fear, not all white people, but there's a fear about many white people of becoming a quote-unquote racial minority.
Right.
And the reason why is because they know that for decades and hundreds of years, they have mistreated racial minorities. And they're afraid what was done unto them, what they've done unto others will be done unto them.
And the demographers tell us that it is inevitable that there will be more people of color in this country than white people. In fact, there are
2043.
Yeah, there are more babies of color being born in this country than whites right now.
Absolutely, absolutely. 2043, you would not have any one ethnic group or race that's the majority. Okay, so you have some white people, not all of them, you have some who fear this, and they're being fed this type of fear on the Fox News network, Breitbart, that just got rid of Stephen K. Bannon yesterday, right? One of the poster boys of white supremacy. So when we look at this, we see Trump runs on the platform of law and order. We see that Trump talks about how Mexicans are taking away people's jobs, things like this. What Trump didn't say is that factory output had doubled since the 1980s. But corporations are doing it with 1/3 the labor force because of automation, technology, software programs, things like this, that are eliminating millions of middle-class jobs, okay? Now, at the same time that this is taking place, right now, you got more unfilled jobs in this country than you've had in the last 17 years.
Yes.
But that's a trend that started under President Obama.
Yes.
Because when you go back to April of 2016, you had about 5 million unfilled jobs in this country. So that's a trend that continues. So when we look at Nixon and Trump, we see similarities in what was going on in this country, and Roland Martin talks about. I used to guest host his national radio show a lot. Roland Martin talks about how Donald Trump is the end of the third Reconstruction for African Americans. We look at the Reconstruction with the end of Reconstruction in 1877. Anytime you have a period of time of significant advancement African Americans make, you always have a white backlash to this.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And we see Trump being that as well. So we'll deal with that. We'll deal with the rapid voter suppression that took place in the 2016 election.
The gerrymandering.
The gerrymandering, right. Well, it wasn't just the gerrymandering. You had 14 new states that had new voter ID laws.
Right.
Because Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was struck down because of the Supreme Court case of Shelby County versus Holder, 2013, right? So, one of the things I deal with is how laws impacts every aspect of our lives. Because and laws are made by politicians. This is why politicians are called lawmakers, right? So 2 ways to understand politics. Number 1, the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources. Number 2, the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. So when we look at this, we see that you had 14 new states that had new voter ID laws. You had 868 fewer polling places this past election cycle that very few people want to talk about.
Right. And I have to mention, too, that as soon as the Supreme Court took the teeth out of the Voting Rights Act, these southern states acted with the quickness of changing their laws. There was no debate over it. They weren't saying, should we change this? They couldn't wait.
Exactly. But this was ruled by the Supreme Court. So it's important to look at this, right? So this is Shelby County versus Holder. Where's Shelby County located? It's located in Alabama.
Right.
Okay? It's located in Alabama. Now, we know Senator Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, former senator, who's now the Attorney General, right? One of the most backwards Attorney Generals we ever had. But he cheered the gutting of the Voting Rights Act. We know that in 1986, he was deemed too racist to be a federal judge, right? And we know that it was Coretta Scott King, the widow of Dr. King, who sent an 8 or 9 page letter to the Senate Judiciary Committee that was over the confirmation hearings, saying that if he became a federal judge, it would undo her husband's legacy.
Yes.
Now, Shelby County is a mainly white suburb in Alabama. They voted heavily for Roy Moore in this past special election for senator in Alabama.
Yes.
They sued Attorney General Eric Holder. That's the holder. That's the defendant, right? So what the Supreme Court did, what they gutted Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. So a lot of people think the Voting Rights Act has no purpose. No, it does. Okay? Yes. What Section 5 dealt with was pre-clearance. And what it stated was that these former states that had a history of putting obstacles in the way of African Americans voting, okay, literacy tests, poll taxes, things like this. Many of them in these former Confederate states, like Alabama, that took up arms against the Union, broke away from the Union in 1860 and 1861, and fought the Civil War to keep slavery in place. Right. They said it was for states' rights, but it was states' rights to hold slaves. No. Right. It was states' rights to maintain slaves. Exactly. This is what this was about. Okay? So they said that any changes that they wanted to make in the location of polling places, how many weekends you can have souls to the polls and early voting, they had to get approval from a federal judge.
Right.
Striking down Section 5 weakened the Voting Rights Act and took away this pre-clearance. Yes. So then, after this, you have all these new round of voter ID laws. But 2016 was the first presidential election that you did not have the full weight of the Voting Rights Act. And we also saw a 7-point drop in the turnout of African Americans. Because in 2012, it was a record number of African Americans who voted in that 2012 presidential election. 66% of African Americans who registered to vote voted. This scared the hell out of Republicans.
Yes.
This scared them to death because they said, they're flexing their
and
political
probably
power.
some Democrats.
And probably some Democrats also, right. So what happened was, here they come. Now the Section 5 is struck down the next year, 2013. Okay? So now they come back, and a lot of us didn't understand what was taking place with these voter ID laws. And the voter suppression laws. I talked about this on my show and here on the 19 AM Superstation, and some of us are still clueless about what happened. Okay, so we're gonna break this down because these laws are still in place.
Mm-hmm.
November 6, 2018 midterm elections are crucial. All 435 seats in the House of Representatives are up.
Right.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, first of all, Mike Hotep, one of our favorite guests in the studio with us. Our number is 313-778-7600. I see folks on the phone line. We're going to get to you shortly. But before we do, I got to ask you, Mike.
Go ahead.
At what point, well, let me figure out the best way to phrase this.
Okay.
Earlier this week, I talked about how, given everything that we see happening in the White House and with Donald Trump and with the Republican Congress and all of that, I asked the question, are there still black men who are willing to get up, get out, protest, do what they have to do to fight for their rights? And I referenced that famous picture from Memphis where all those black men who were sanitation workers had the sign, "I am a man."
Oh, yeah.
So the question I have is, one, is there a black organizing that is taking place now?
Mm-hmm.
And do we still, as a community, have the will to oppose the things that you were just talking about?
Oh, absolutely. You have the African Americans organizing across the country. We see them organizing and fighting back in St. Louis. In St. Louis, you had the acquittal of Officer Jason Shockley and the killing of Anthony Marr Smith. You have economic boycotts declared by clergy, declared by businessmen and women in St. Louis going on right now. Okay, and during the Christmas season, they were talking about no justice, no profit. They set up a website that deals with this. AtlantaBlackStar.com has had articles about this. Black America Web. Mm-hmm. Actually, people can check out this article from AtlantaBlackStar.com. Black St. Louis leaders call on supporters to boycott Target, the department store, in wake of officers' acquittal. Black St. Louis leaders call on supporters to boycott Target in wake of officers' acquittal. We see people pushing back with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. We see the Lawyers Guild. I forgot the exact name of the Lawyers Guild. Kristen Clark is with them. But they have been engaged in suing, being involved in lawsuits in various states like Texas that have been engaged in voter suppression. Mm-hmm. We see people fighting back. We look at colorchange.org, right? Colorchange.org was at the forefront of getting Bill O'Reilly off the air, off of Fox News, who was the darling of the cable news network TV shows, had the highest rated cable news network show for something like 10, 13 years. And they put pressure on various corporations, advertisers, to withdraw economic support from his show. And 80 advertisers canceled their ads with the O'Reilly factor and ended up with